Now, let me ask you about that, because this is really a fundamental issue in the debate about same-sex marriage. You know, look at a street. There's one house where two men live together. They're in a committed relationship. Across the street, there's a man, a woman, and their child. What difference does it make to the family of three whether or not the same-sex couple is married or not? How will that impact their family? How will that impact the state of their marriage and them as parents?
Well, I think it will affect them as parents pretty directly, because I think that the public schools will immediately or very shortly teach their children that their views of marriage are wrong, and that the adoption of same-sex marriage is a great civil rights triumph, and that people who disagree with the government's definition of marriage are like racists who oppose interracial marriage. So I think that if you, I mean, that would be my first and most obvious answer. You're going to find it means recognizing that marriage is not a private and personal act. That gay couple living in their house doesn't affect me. Even that gay couple having rights and benefits may not affect me. But that, if the government says that a same-sex union is a marriage, it's changing the definition of marriage for everyone, whether you like it or not. And so I would, you know, the consequence, I haven't even gone into some of the other consequences we're beginning to see unfold. You take Loving v. Virginia analogy seriously. By the way, about at least half the courts that have ruled in this country have rejected, actually none of them have accepted the Loving v. Virginia analogy, with the arguable exception of the California Supreme Court. Even the courts that have ruled for gay marriage have generally done so on equal protection grounds and not on the idea that there's a fundamental right to same-sex marriage, which was the groundwork of the Loving v. Virginia decision. But what happened there, okay? It took less than 20 years before, once that principle was in the law and no further act by the government, before a fundamentalist Protestant university that opposed interracial marriage and dating was told by the government that it had to choose between its views on marriage and its tax-exempt status. Okay? That was litigated up to the Supreme Court in a famous case called Bob Jones University versus the IRS. Yes, the government can do that. Now, I have to pause and say I don't have a problem with that in race. I do not see the analogy between gay marriage and interracial marriage, as I've already explained to you. But the people who do see the analogy also have to understand what they are proposing. The government gets involved to repress racism in a wide variety of ways. Professional licenses. Can you be a doctor, a teacher, a social worker, a lawyer if you openly advocate for racism or try to conduct your practice on racist lines? Well, probably not. There's a case in California, came right at the same time the court ruled for gay marriage. It was about whether or not an evangelical Christian physician could be penalized for refusing to artificially inseminate a lesbian couple. And it wasn't about whether this couple could have children, because the doctor was willing to did refer this woman to another doctor. This couple had 3 children in the course of the litigation. It's about whether one doctor can stay in practice if she wasn't personally willing to make a fatherless child under these circumstances. The answer was no, that's discrimination. You're like a racist if you do that. That would be like refusing to treat black couples. So. Exactly. Right, but you can't say, therefore, if you think that it's not going to affect it. You know, you live in a state in which probably something like 60 or 70% of your neighbors disagree with him, and you're proposing to use the power of government to repress them in their views in a new way. And I just think that the people of this great commonwealth ought to hear that and ought to understand it. Thanks. Gay marriage will have consequences.
Okay, if I can respond, and there's a lot to respond to, and first of all, when Maggie says there's no studies saying that the children of same-sex couples, okay, well, I thought maybe I misheard you.
Whether being married would benefit their
Well, but that's not fair, because they can't get married almost anywhere, and they've only been able to get married for a few years. So, number one.
No evidence. That's all I'm saying.
But I would say, just reading from the American Academy of Pediatrics, and I have a list of about 50 organizations that are dedicated to the well-being of children who support same-sex marriage and same-sex or same-sex adoption, same-sex couples raising children. I'm just going to quote one. A considerable body of professional literature provides evidence that children with parents who are homosexual can have the same advantages, the same expectations for health, adjustment, and development as can children whose parents are heterosexual. When 2 adult parents are parenting a child, they and the child deserve the serenity that comes with legal recognition. So, and that's just one of hundreds of quotes that I could read from very important organization. And when Maggie says, again, she says that you have to have a mountain of evidence if you have my position, if you have her position, but no evidence if you have mine, that's inconsistent with Maggie saying, continuing to say things like, well, we just don't know, it might be that. Again, I'm waiting, and I think Scott's question went directly to the heart of it, because I've asked it, Scott's asked it.
And I answered it. What do you say about those consequences? I just
I
listed
will.
them.
I'm going to talk about those consequences.
Because I did make an argument, right?
Oh, no, you did.
Don't
you
say
did.
I didn't make
well,
one.
No,
Respond to it.
but you haven't made any argument.
Yeah,
well,
I did.
If I can finish the sentence.
Okay, sorry.
Let me address your arguments one by one. All right. Because again, I still don't see the evidence of what's going to happen in terms of increased divorce among straight couples, straight couples going gay and dropping their kids off at a animal shelter or something. I just haven't seen anything like that. What I would say is a couple of things. First of all, public schools. Maggie says kids will have to the parents will have to see their kids be taught that about gay marriage in public school in a way that they object to. Now, first of all, I can't promise that won't happen. There were people who opposed desegregation, yet we still teach Martin Luther King and Brown versus Board of Education. The fact that those parents objected and continue to object is not a reason to deny people civil rights. Now, the other question I have is, what do we want schools to teach about gay people? Because they are still going to continue to exist. This couple that's going to wreak so much havoc on the block that Scott asked about, that Maggie discussed, they're still living there now. Okay, the only thing is they're going to get a piece of paper, which apparently is going to cause all hell to break loose in the neighborhood. But they're there now. Their kids are going to see them now. There are children in public schools now who have gay parents. What do we want them taught? It seems like, and again, I would say my bill just is about marriage. It's not a self-executing curriculum bill. I don't dictate what people are taught in schools. But it does seem fair to say that, yes, maybe we will have to teach that there are gay people and that, you know, some ideas of tolerance, like we teach about everything else. And again, you're free always to go to a private school or to homeschool if you really object to that message. But you're not guaranteed agreement with every aspect of the school curriculum. There's another remedy you have as well, Maggie, other than private school, which is you can run for school board. And you could do what they did in Texas, which is completely revamp the whole curriculum, get rid of Thomas Jefferson, put in Phyllis Schlafly, and have a whole different view of the world. You have the right to do that. But that's not a reason to deny people civil rights, that some people will object to what their kids are taught in school. You also said that there will be other consequences. There were big consequences and continue to be big consequences to racial integration. As you know, the Supreme Court every term deals with some affirmative action case. The Supreme Court every term deals with some racial discrimination cases. That's not a reason to say, oh my God, we made a mistake in granting black people equal rights. Look at all the mishigas. That's a technical term. But look at all the mishigas that has caused. No, you don't deny people civil rights because someone's going to object to it. There's a concept in the law called the heckler's veto. And the heckler's veto means that someone won't like if we give someone their rights, and they may act out in a bad way. So therefore, we can't give them their rights. For example, a black protester can't march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge because a white racist may throw rocks at them. Or, the case about the Jews, the Nazis marching in Skokie, Illinois. But if we told people that they had a veto power over other people's rights simply by objecting and simply by acting out in some way, that those people won't get that rights, I suggest that all of our rights are at risk. I can't promise, Maggie, that it will always be socially acceptable in all circles to say, because I'm not calling Maggie or a bigot
It's not personal. You're
no,
very nice to me.
But I don't hear that language when I have these discussions. Some people deserve it because they say hateful things. Maggie's not said anything hateful that I've heard, so I do not call her that, and I don't think that's the problem. But to the extent that, will it always be socially acceptable to say gays can't be married in every circumstance? I can't promise that. There's circles where it's not socially acceptable now. There's plenty of circles where it is socially acceptable and socially acceptable to say far worse things about gay people. But I can't promise it'll always be acceptable. I can promise it will always be legal. You have a First Amendment. Anyone can speak out. There are still people who object to things racial, to things about women, to things about religious minorities. That will always be the law in the state. But again, what my fundamental argument is, these are not compelling reasons to deny people their rights. They're sort of ancillary reasons about people, well, people won't feel good about it. That's, again, that historically has never been a reason to justify what I view to be discrimination.
Right, and I guess I would say